if you go to page 16 of the President's speech, you will see that some items have been listed. And these items, I think, are the most important items that we are here to consider. The President listed, first and foremost, the issue of structure of government, then the system of government, going all the way down to the issue of rights of women and children. And I think these issues are the most important ones. These issues are issues of politics and making of constitution, and they are the most important things I think this conference need to really consider. Some other contributors here, and some other delegates here, have often talked about attitude being the source of our problem. For me, I don't think the sources of problem of a nation are to be sought in the attitude of the people. The question is, where do the attitudes come from? I think the source of the problem of any nation should be sought in the ways and manner wealth is created and now wealth is shared amongst the people. That is, in the relations of production. What I'm saying is that level of politics, ultimately, that will determine whether a nation will grow or not. In Nigeria, the authoritative allocation of values is skewed in favor of a few on the basis of class, ethnicity, and religion. And I think that is the area we really need to look at. Yeah. Now, that takes me to the issue of the minorities. I think many of us have approached the issue of minorities wrongly. I think the issue of minority is best approached from the point of view of self-determination of peoples. We have the relevant conventions. We have the relevant charters. The Atlantic Charter is very clear on this. The first clause, the second clause, the third clause. Then if you look at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, it's also very clear on this. And what am I saying? That before you make any territorial changes, you have to take into consideration the wish of the people concerned. And then that ultimately, you must recognize that every people deserve the right to self-determination. They deserve the right to determine under what sovereign they want to live and their form of government. And I think that is the best way to look at the issue of the minorities. So the people must have a say, in the territory where they are found, where they are located, or under what sovereign they have to be, and the kind of government. Now, I have some suggestions, not to take much of our time. I have some important suggestions which I think we need to really consider if we hope to ultimately resolve the issues of minority, the issue of conflicts among the various ethnic groups and religions in Nigeria. One, I think strongly that we need to restructure Nigeria along, the regional line. That is, we have to restructure Nigeria into regions on the basis of ethno-cultural contiguity. We need to restructure Nigeria on the basis of ethno-cultural contiguity such that a region will be either a single ethnic group or a group of ethnic groups that have agreed to stay together. Two, I think we need to adopt the parliamentary system, which for me, I think is cheaper, to run than the presidential system. The presidential system, is given to, is prone to corruption.
Time up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. Professor Sylvanus Oboh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, my name is Sylvanus Oboh, Professor of Agriculture, representing Edo State. I want to join other delegates in acknowledging the beautiful speech made by our President on the 17th of March. And if we refer to page 18, the President indeed said our country was ranked along with some developing countries, including India, Malaysia, and others. Professor Ayan did contradict this, and he said we were actually ahead of these countries. What criteria did we use? They were developments that were based on revenue from agriculture. Please permit me, I will speak as an agriculturist. Our leaders in the 60s left lasting legacies in this country. We all know what Awolowo did in the West. We know what Ahmadu Bello did in the North. We know what we did in Midwest. And we know what the Easterners did. The legacies are there today to speak for themselves. During this period, we didn't have unemployment of this magnitude. We didn't have security challenges of this magnitude. The present dichotomy between the Christians and Muslims, the North and the South, did not exist. In fact, there was unity from inter-regional trade in commodities. Mr. Chairman, we do recognize that we must discuss oil in this confab. But if you agree with me, if we take away oil from our discussions at this confab and we bring in agriculture, we arrive at consensus in all our discussions. Nobody's asking what happens to Nigeria without oil. This oil must go one day, and we are not planning for that period. Agric has been relegated. We have worked in the past 30 years, have been on the field. We've developed policies. We've come out with strategies. But our problem is implementation. Mr. Chairman, it is time to give Agric its pride of place in our nationhood. And if we must compete globally in agriculture and as a major source of job for our youths, food for our teeming populations, and for growth, we must go back to agriculture, and we must address the following. We must increase our budgetary allocation and other fiscal incentives to agriculture at all levels, federal, state, and local governments. We must provide strong and support legislation for agricultural transformation agenda of the federal government. We must go into serious research and development at the university level and at the level of the research institutes, including biotechnology. We must build a strong community value chain and institutions. Mr. Chairman, I will stop. We'll meet at the committee level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Professor Yakubu A. Ochefu.
Mr. Chairman, Yakubu Aboki Ochefu. I'm a professor of economic history representing Professional Groups Historical Society of Nigeria, and I'm Vice Chancellor of Kwara University in Wukari, Taraba State, the only community-owned university in the whole of West Africa. I begin my address by sharing with you, Mr. Chairman, and it's just saying, I killed an elephant, may be correct. I carried it on my shoulders and brought it home, is certainly not correct. President Jonathan may have killed an elephant by convoking this conference. And as historians, we see that as a man who has a sense of history, and that is what distinguishes a politician from a statesman. Sitting in this hall for the past 3 weeks, I've seen that different generations have different feelings about their generation. Some look back with nostalgia, those good old days, whereas some people are here saying that the problems were caused in those good old days. The question I want to ask this audience is, how well have we used our history as our rear view mirror? Because to make progress in a nation, a nation must have a sense of history. Any nation that does not have a sense of history is like somebody who has woken up and lost his or her memory. The memory loss enables us to sit down here today forgetting that the story of our national leadership at independence, the story of one Ahmadu, Awolowo, and Azikiwe, the 3 A's, is a story that has suspicion, fear, and lack of will to forge a national united front for development. Mr. Chairman, in 1960, Professor Wolfgang Stolper, the liberal economist that was hired to drive our first development agenda, the National Development Plan, asked that question whether the political leadership of this country had the will to implement that development plan. And it is that lack of will that has enabled us to produce unproductive and destructive politicians, entrepreneurs, and public officials that have determined the trajectory, the development trajectory of this country since independence. And this is the root of our problem. There is an iron law of economic development, which is has been implemented by everybody who has developed in the last 50 years. And that is education, patriotic leadership, and the pursuit of social and economic policies that emphasize basic human needs, lays the foundation for the well-being of its citizens and provides equal opportunities. That the majority of our citizens are suffering is putting it very mildly. Many of the youths in this country are hanging on. And I want to quote Osisioma, who put the matter very crudely, that between 1450 and 1850, 400,000 Africans were taken away as slaves. If you bring a slave ship that can carry 1 million youths and you put it in a Papa port, it will not take 1 day to fill. That is the way Osisioma put it. And that is to show the extent to which we have been devalued as a nation. And I don't have to be a soothsayer to predict that if we don't do anything about it, in the next few years, a major social revolution will happen. Let me leave this audience with a poser, Mr. Chairman. 3 roommates, 1 blind, 1 deaf and dumb, and 1 lame. They woke up one morning and found that the lame had died. How did the deaf and dumb communicate to the blind this unfortunate development? Thank you.
Well spoken as a Vice Chancellor. Thank you. Chief, His Excellency Chief Peter Odili.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Peter Odili, medical practitioner, former governor of Rivers State, elder statesman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and use this opportunity to commend your effort in supporting the substantive chairman in going through the initial inertia of this conference and taking us to this point where we can coast smoothly. I want to commend and congratulate every delegate because none of the processes that produced our list was non-competitive. Mr. Chairman, I want to commend Mr. President for the rare display of executive courage in convoking this conference, in spite of all the challenges on the way. Commend him for his brilliant speech, delivered very presidentially, with all the contents that we need to work for the future of Nigeria. Mr. Chairman, you cannot treat an ailment you have not correctly diagnosed. For treatment to be effective, the diagnosis has to be right. We are all experts in listing all the woes and challenges of this nation. But how did we get to where we are now? Mr. Chairman, my guess is that we started this union on a wrong footing. 1914, no Nigerian was consulted before the amalgamation. But all that is history. We commend the efforts of our founding fathers who made efforts in the First Republic to attempt to put us on the path to national unity. It was aborted in 1966. We haven't recovered. The challenge before this conference now, which Mr. President has lucidly explained and presented to us, if you look at his speech from pages 16 to 19, the contents are there. I want to appeal to our colleagues. In the next few days, we shall go into committees. We must place justice on the table and look at all the major issues, the fundamental challenges to our national unity. We must listen to each other, sincerely address the fears of each group. It is only by doing that that we can understand ourselves and our irrepressible pluralism and ensure that at the end of our deliberations, we're able to allay the fears of even the smallest group. Because, Mr. Chairman, no chain is stronger than the weakest link of that chain. We must therefore factor the interests of the smallest and the strongest, so that at the end of the day, we can have a national cohesion that all of us can buy into, that all of us can be loyal to, that all of us will be committed to. That is the only way we can create a sense of common good that will evoke patriotism, that will enable us get to where we are destined to get to. That is my appeal, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, for that contribution. Odumaki. I haven't said whether it's Mr. or Mrs. Okay. You are getting up. Okay, Odumaki, Mr. Nyinka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me join those who have congratulated the President for the speech inaugurating this conference. In the years to come, when they talk about transformation agenda, nobody will remember the megawatts. I think it's this conference that will be remembered as the transformation agenda of Mr. President. Now in his speech, Mr. President asked us to do some introspection. And I've been doing a lot of that. Because like Dr. Odili said, if you don't know where the rain began to beat us, we may not know how to dry our clothes and to stop the rain from beating us again. A few days ago, I was watching on diplomatic channels, and I saw one Mr. Ayogu talking about how his son was hacked to death in Ghana because he has sent his son for university education in Ghana, and his Ghanaian roommates have taken the money, the dollars, he had taken from here to Ghana, and they killed the boy. And the man was lamenting that the Ghanaian police promised him they are going to do justice, but justice has not been done. Much as I sympathize with him, I was just wondering, how can you be seeking justice abroad when you cannot get justice at home? Has anybody been brought to book for those 56 children slaughtered in their sleep in Yobe State a few weeks back in our country? No. And I began to ask myself, how come that today Nigerian parents have to send their children to Ghana to even attend fake universities? And that is where the rain began to beat us. In this country at a point, the regions built universities that were world-class. Western region built IFE, Northern region built ABU, Eastern region built UNN. These are world universities ranked around the world. Today, the federal government took over those universities. When we embark on unitary system of government and destroy all the universities, they have built more universities. Today, no Nigerian university is ranked in Africa or in the Commonwealth. And why? Because in 1966, when we embarked on unitary system of government, Femi from Calabar prison wrote a book titled Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution. And Mr. Chairman, permit me to quote some of the things he said. He did say, besides, it's not difficult to forecast that the work of government in Nigeria under a unitary constitution is bound to become unduly complex, inextricably tangled, enslaved, unwieldy, and wasteful, and productive of disharmony and discontent among the people. And he said, unless we have veritable supermen at the end of affairs, the administrative machinery will eventually disintegrate and break down under the crushing weight of bureaucratic centralism. That is where we are today. And we need to retrace our steps.